Our emotions are kind of like a double-edged sword, right? When they're flowing with joy, they create these memories that you cherish for your entire life. But when they're flowing with anger or frustration, man, they can lead to a lifetime of regret. We've all been there. That moment our emotions just take over, and we say or do something we immediately wish we could snatch back. But what if I told you there's a superpower that lets you hit pause and take back control? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dive into. To really get this, just think about a classic traffic jam. Some drivers, they just react. They're laying on the horn, they're smacking the steering wheel, they're cursing, even though none of that does a single thing to change the situation. But then you have other drivers. They respond. They use the time to plan their day, they put on some good music, or they just breathe. You see the difference? One is a knee-jerk, thoughtless action. The other is a conscious, thoughtful choice. And that tiny difference, it's everything. So here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we're going to talk about why this is truly a life-changing superpower. Then we'll look at the epic battle happening inside your brain every single day. After that, we'll unmask your personal emotional triggers. Then I'll give you a simple 5-step method for taking back control. And we'll wrap it all up with a 7-day challenge to lock this new skill in for good. Okay, let's get one thing straight right away. Choosing not to react isn't weakness. It is immense strength. It's about having the wisdom to know when to speak and, more importantly, how to speak. Take the actor Shah Rukh Khan. I saw this interview where a reporter kept pushing him with a really provocative question about his son. But he didn't get angry. He just paused, and with total calm, he turned the question right back at the reporter, completely diffusing the whole thing. Now that is power. So what is going on inside our heads in these high-stakes moments? Let's get into the science of it. That intense urge to react, it's actually an ancient survival tool. Think about it. Back when our ancestors were facing down, a saber-toothed tiger, reacting instantly, fight or flight, was the only way to stay alive. The problem is, our modern brains apply that same life-or-death urgency to emotional threats, like getting criticized in a meeting or being frustrated with a family member. The easiest way to picture this internal battle is to imagine you have two captains inside your brain. First, you've got your emotional brain. Let's call him the hot-headed player. He's all impulse, he's super fast, and he runs purely on gut feelings. Then you've got your logical brain, Captain Cool. He's thoughtful, he's analytical, and he always thinks about the consequences. The whole game is about who grabs the steering wheel first. And there's actually a scientific name for when the hot-headed player wins. It's called an amygdala hijack. Basically, when you feel emotionally threatened, a little fire alarm called the amygdala goes off in your brain, and your emotional side completely hijacks the system before Captain Cool even gets a chance to look at the map. That's the exact moment we say or do something that just seconds later, we desperately wish we could undo. So, if we want to stop these emotional hijacks, we have to figure out what's setting them off in the first place. We've got to unmask our emotional triggers. I have a friend who, I'm not kidding, once screamed and literally ran away from her desk at work. The cause? A tiny little cockroach. Now, logically, the cockroach was no threat at all, but her fear hijacked her logic, and her flight response took over. We all have our own version of that cockroach, don't we? Now, everyone's triggers are a little different, but they usually fall into a few common buckets. Things like our past experiences, these weird mental shortcuts called cognitive biases, or even just our physical state. Being hungry or tired can make us way more reactive. Our social environment, our deepest core beliefs, they all play a part. The key thing here is to start figuring out what your specific triggers are. Let's look a little closer at one of those: cognitive biases. These are basically the stories our brain tells itself to try and make sense of the world quickly, but a lot of the time, those stories are just plain wrong. If you have a deep-down belief that all bosses are harsh, you're going to react defensively to even the most helpful feedback. If you think rich people are always bad, you'll react to them based on that story, not on who they actually are. These mental shortcuts are a massive source of our knee-jerk reaction. Okay, so we get the problem, and we're starting to see what causes it, so how do we actually fix it? Let's get to the good stuff, the solution. It's a simple 5-step framework I call the PEAC method. Think of this as your practical, in-the-moment toolkit for wresting control back from the hot-headed player and giving Captain Cool the time he needs to make a much smarter call. It's an acronym, which makes it easy to remember. P is for pause. E is for evaluate your triggers. A is for avoid raising your tone. C is for choose your words. And the last E is for explore the perspective. Let's break down a few of the most important steps. Honestly, the pause is the single most powerful tool you have. It's a game changer. Just taking a few seconds, or even just one or two deep breaths, is enough to interrupt that amygdala hijack we talked about. It creates this tiny but critical gap between the trigger and your response. And in that gap, your logical brain, capped and cool, gets to come back online, which allows you to choose how you respond instead of just defaulting to an automatic reaction. Okay, now let's talk about choosing your words. This right here is a perfect example of what not to do. These are called you statements, and they are pure gasoline on a fire. They're accusatory, they feel like an attack. As soon as someone hears you always or you never, what do? They get defensive. And just like that, the conversation isn't about solving a problem anymore, it's about winning a fight. Now, compare that last one to this. This is an I statement. See the difference? Instead of blaming the other person, you're just explaining your own feelings. You're not attacking, you're sharing your experience. This simple little shift from you to I completely changes the dynamic. It creates empathy. It invites the other person to understand where you're coming from, turning a potential blow-up into a constructive conversation. And finally, let's touch on exploring perspective. This one is huge. When you feel that anger or frustration starting to bubble up, ask yourself this one simple but incredibly powerful question. That person who cut you off in traffic, that rude comment someone left online, that small mistake you made at work, will any of it actually matter in 5 years? Heck, will it even matter in 5 weeks? This question is like an instant reality check. It helps you decide if a situation is truly worth your precious emotional energy. Look, knowing all this stuff is great, but real change only happens when we put it into action. So let's take this theory and turn it into a real, lasting habit. I want to leave you with a super simple, totally doable challenge that you can literally start today. For the next 7 days, that's it, just 1 week, we're going to put all of this into practice. It's not going to take a lot of time, I promise. It just takes a little bit of intention each day to start building that muscle of self-control. So here's the plan. It's just 3 little things each day for 7 days. Step 1, a few times a day, whenever you feel that reactive urge, just practice the pause. Take a breath, that's it. Step 2, in that moment of pause, try to notice what actually triggered you. And step 3, at the end of the day, take 5 minutes, just 5, to journal about what you notice. And here are some prompts to make that journaling super easy. Just asking yourself these simple questions will help you decode your own emotional blueprint. You're not just avoiding bad reactions anymore. You're actually becoming more emotionally intelligent. You're learning to understand yourself on a way deeper level, and that is the real secret to lasting change. So I want you to think about it like this. For a long time, maybe your automatic reactions have been writing the story of your past, your relationships, your career, your own peace of mind. But from this moment forward, you have the tools to pick up the pen yourself. You get to choose your responses. So the only real question left is, what kind of future are you going to write?